it's a mistake when you just ask yes or no, when you don't ask people how to improve the situation and to explain how to improve.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Ben Latour, your coach for clear, confident, natural English. In this video, we're breaking down a couple of things that Monsieur Macron, the current French president, would be able to do in order to sound more natural in English. Now, I'm quite confident of it. He has definitely worked with somebody before, whether it's a pronunciation coach or some kind of specialized teacher, public speaking trainer, but he still has a couple of things that he can improve. Now, if you're a French speaker, there's a lot of things that you can learn from both him, his mistakes, and this video right here. So stay tuned. We're going to be breaking down a couple of things from an exclusive interview he did with the BBC about Brexit a few years ago. Let's get into it. Now, I just want you to pay attention to the way that he's speaking. I'm going to point out a couple of things as we're going along.
I would have definitely fought very hard to win, but I think it's a mistake when you just ask yes or no, when you don't.
All right, perfect. Now, since we're talking about habits and pronunciation mistakes, one of the most common mistakes that I hear people making, especially French people, is the word mistake. Mistake. Now, you've probably already heard about intonation and word stress or l'accent tonique. In this case, we're talking about mistake. Mistake. Two main things to look out for. It's not mistake, it's mistake. Just like if you had a steak. Mistake. The second thing here is you want to be able to relax your mouth and your lips especially in order to make the I sound. Listen to the difference between I, between seat, sit, between mistake and mistake. You hear the difference? Mistake, mistake. Let's keep going.
Don't ask people how to improve the situation and to explain how to improve it. That's why I do believe in these conventions we will organize to.
All right, perfect. Now, he might have learned more of a British pronunciation, so which is why he might be saying something like organize as opposed to organized. If you're going for an American, a North American pronunciation, make sure you're always pronouncing those R's. Earlier, he also used the word hard, although he said hard. Now, I want to go back here and play the word convention. Convention. He makes a very typical, very classic French mistake of using sounds that don't exist in English. In this case, the sound en. I've got a visitor. All right, let's go back and listen to this word convention. Convention. He's making a very common French mistake, which involves using sounds that don't exist in English. In this case, the nasal sounds like en. Other examples would be on or un, etc. Let's go back and listen to it.
Explain how to improve it. That's why I do believe in these conventions we will organize.
Conventions, conventions. The sound un does not exist in any dialect of English, except of course, French people speaking English.
To better associate people. But as for the Brexit.
Another key thing that he's making here is using consistently the instead of the. Now, this might be one of the elements that you think is interesting about the French accent, but it's actually one of the things that makes your English sound less natural and perhaps less competent or credible if you're speaking with perfect grammar, vocabulary, the right expressions, but you're saying z or de. People stop listening to exactly what you're saying. It takes them out of the moment and they focus more on how you're saying it. Now, this can be quite problematic if you're in a situation where you're perhaps doing sales, working with people in the United States, and the way that you're speaking, where you're from, and the way you present yourself matters. Hint, it always does.
Vote. My understanding is that middle classes and working classes, and especially the oldest in your country, decided that the recent decades were not in the.
This is a very, very common mistake here. The recent decades. The recent decades. Of course, we have the, right? The, right? But listen to the word, the way he says the word decades. Decades. He says decades. Decades. Now, to decay is actually an entirely different word. Decay. This means to break down, to disintegrate. And You may or may not have your opinions about Brexit and your associations with decay as well, and he might have opinions as well. But I know that he's trying to say decades, given the context. Decades. Two things to point out here. De, I'm putting the stress on de. Decades. Decades. Instead, he puts the stress on cades, decades, which makes it sound like deterioration, as I just mentioned.
The favor. And that's the adjustments made by both EU and globalization, because for me it was.
All right, now listen to the way he said the word both. Both. There's a lot of layers to this, but the way he sounded like bus. Bus. Now, a bus is a vehicle that will get you to where you want to be. Instead, try adding the th, as I mentioned, both, both, and changing the vowel sound to more of an o. In French, you have boire de l'eau, eau. However, as English speakers do, both in American English and in British English, there's an extra rounding that happens. Notice if I were to say the word both, both. I'm not just saying both, I'm saying both. So I'm starting with more of an like he's doing, bus, buth, both. You see that extra layer there? That simple change can make your English sound a lot more natural, whether you're speaking British English, Australian English, or American English. Both. Now, this concludes this quick wrap-up, this quick analysis of Emmanuel Macron speaking English in this interview here. There's a lot of different things that we could go into, like the intonation, the way he's linking words, the specific sounds he's using. Now, I should say that he's doing relatively well compared to a lot of people. And you might think that Emmanuel Macron speaks quite well, or you might think that he doesn't speak quite well. Let me know what you think. Did you find certain things to be more insightful, more challenging, or is all of this just still seem confusing? Let me know in the comments or send me a message. I'm always happy to help, and I hope this was helpful.